Welcome to meeting number 14 of the House of Commons Standing Committee on Government Operations and Estimates. Today we will continue our study on the national shipbuilding strategy. We will also discuss committee business during the last 60 minutes of the meeting. The committee has the expectation that all witnesses will be open about any potential conflict of interest that they may have. This is to ensure that the committee can fully understand the context of the testimony it is about to receive. If you feel your testimony may be colored by a previous or current interest, I invite the witnesses to disclose this during their opening statements. Today's meeting is taking place in a hybrid format pursuant to House Order of November 25, 2021. Members are attending in person in the room and remotely using the Zoom application. Regarding the speaking list, the committee clerk and I will do our best that we can to maintain a consolidated order of speaking for all members, whether participating virtually or in person. I'd like to take this opportunity to remind all participants to this meeting that screenshots or taking photos of your screen is not permitted. Given the ongoing pandemic situation and in light of recommendations from public health authorities as well as the directive of the Board of Internal Economy on October 19, 2021, to remain healthy and safe, the following is recommended for all those attending the meeting in person. Anyone with symptoms should participate by Zoom and not attend the meeting in person. Everyone must maintain 2-meter physical distancing, whether seated or standing. Everyone must wear a non-medical mask while circulating the room. It is recommended in the strongest possible terms that members wear their masks at all times, including when seated. Non-medical masks, which provide better clarity over cloth masks, are available in the room. Everyone present must maintain proper hand hygiene by using the hand sanitizer at the room entrance. Committee rooms are cleaned before and after each meeting. To maintain this, everyone is encouraged to clean the surfaces such as their desks, their chairs, or their microphones with the provided disinfectant wipes when vacating or taking a seat. As the chair, I will be enforcing these measures for the duration of the meeting, and I thank members in advance for your cooperation. With that said, I would like to welcome our witnesses. We'll hear from Mr. Choi and from Admiral Norman. And with that said, I will invite Mr. Choi to make his opening statements.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Dear Mr. Speaker and honorable members, thank you for inviting me to provide my insights to this August committee. Many other witnesses have already spoken to you about the complexities and challenges of the processes behind the NSS, so I will focus my remarks along 3 major issues. Firstly, Canadian naval ambitions as a driver of CSC design. So this RCN essentially operates as 2 smaller navies with 1 on each coast. In standard practice, the so-called rule of 3 means that for every ship deployed overseas, you need at least 2 more to maintain fleet maintenance and training requirements. And so for Canada, this means that essentially every combat vessel that aims to deploy overseas must have the ability to defend itself against modern air, surface, and underwater threats because it will often be operating on its own. And so this has driven the decision to ensure that all 15 ships are built to the same standard that incorporates modern air defense systems into the anti-submarine Type 26 hull. And even so, modern submarines are equipped with anti-ship missiles, so even an ASW-centric vessel needs a very robust anti-air capability. So are the CSCs able to perform air defense in addition to its ASW focus? My assessment is yes. Bottom line up front, the ships can carry an order of magnitude greater air defense missiles than the current frigates if they're using the same type of missiles. So even if the exact number of missiles get reduced during the remaining design work on ships, they'll still be much more capable than in our existing Halifax class. The new decision to acquire F-35s also further enhances the CSC's combat ranges. Secondly, the geostrategic need to develop Canadian shipbuilding. Other speakers have noted the Chinese Navy's rise as the world's largest in the number of ships. What I haven't seen discussed is the limited capacity in the Western naval shipyards to help maintain our collective lead. By mid-decade, the US will have only 3 shipyards dedicated to building complex warships like the CSC, all of which will be at their maximum capacity. In this context, Canada's Halifax Yard thus has the potential to provide North America with basically 25% of its advanced warship construction capacity. And this is of its own a fairly important thing, but also it can be leveraged in our discussions with the Americans when the topic concerns Canada's willingness to pull our weight in defense spending. Now, more importantly, the alternative of buying ships from abroad would be buying a foreign policy to the country building our ships. The decades-long period required to build all 15 CSCs means that the country building our ships would have a multi-billion-dollar hostage that they can leverage in any negotiation or crisis. In some, warships should serve as a tool of Canadian foreign policy, not hold it hostage. And thirdly, the limitations of current cost estimation methods. Steel is cheap and air is free is the common rule of thumb for naval architects. This means that the cost of a ship does not scale linearly with its size. Unfortunately, size is precisely the metric being employed by the PBO to arrive at the cost estimates for the CSC. And in fact, combat and engineering systems contribute approximately 60 to 70% of a ship's overall costs, whereas the hull contributes a relatively small remainder. Thus, the size of the CSC should not be the metric for determining its cost increases. Rather, it should be the combat systems that should be the point of focus. However, unlike the growing size of the ship's hull, the scope of the CSC's combat and engineering systems are unlikely to increase between now and the construction. In short, if the CSC's actual costs do increase, inflation will likely play the dominant role as the ships await their turn to be built over the next 2 decades rather than design. Finally, some witnesses have used a theory-based rule of thumb to determine that CSC's operational cost will be 3 times that of its acquisition cost and that this will be unaffordable. However, recent empirical evidence suggests that reducing acquisition costs do not guarantee a linear reduction in operational costs. Much of this is attributed to the fact that a ship's crew comprises approximately 50% of its operational costs. So we cannot expect the CSC to have a significantly reduced operational cost unless we were to also purchase a design that has a significantly smaller crew, which comes with its own significant downsides. And I will conclude there.
We will now go into questions, and we will start with Mr. Bazan for 6 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just want to thank Professor Choi for his comments and his skill that he has and understanding of what we need to do with our surface combatants. Now, you talked about the PBO report and everything's done on a weight basis, and they're based upon that report. There's been some people that described our CSC as actually just a fat frigate. Can you talk about more of the what weapon systems do we need on there? Especially you mentioned the F-35s and how the reach and capabilities now of surface combatants and our air systems that we'll have in place with F-35s are going to be enhanced. And more importantly is, a lot of people are getting very concerned about the overall costing of where we're at, and everything continues to escalate. We still haven't cut steel for even the first surface combatant. How do we get ships in the water quicker, maintain that Canadian capability of shipbuilding, but at the same time, we're dealing with a changed world with the Russian invasion of Ukraine. And everybody always forgets that Canada's an Arctic neighbor of Russia.
Thank you, Mr. Bazan. So for the air defense section, back around 7 years ago, probably 8 now, we decommissioned our Iroquois-class air defense destroyers, and they provide that long-range air defense capability that can, attack aircraft well out to the horizon and beyond it. Right now, our Halifax-class frigates have been upgraded to do, a very good job of defending themselves, but not so much a larger area around them. And so with the new CSCs, we equipped them with, planning to equip them with a new phased array radar, which essentially means you can actually take them down for maintenance without actually turning it off. And so, in the case they receive any damage, you can repair them without, becoming blind, unlike certain other ships like the French and Italian vessels that were offered to us earlier. And so with these new radar technologies, we can see farther, more precisely what we're looking at, and then aim and direct the necessary missiles out to that long range distance. And in cooperation with the F-35, which our ships are planned to be equipped with so-called cooperative engagement capability, CEC. This essentially lets an F-35 be a forward sensor. And so if F-35 can fly well out to the horizon beyond it, and then can relay what it sees back to the ship, and then tell the ship where to send its missiles. And so even if the ship can't see over the horizon, it can shoot where the F-35 tells it to shoot. And so
does the FREM have that capability to work with an F-35?
As far as I know, no. That neither of the variants I'm aware of have that capability, though I imagine it could be installed with a lot of additional hardware, software, firmware additions. So yeah. In terms of our second question on bringing these ships into water quicker, well, one of the things I like to say is that the best time to maintain a constant ready shipbuilding capability was 20 or 30 years ago. The second best time is now. So, we are in a state where we have a process set up. It's not ideal. It could be better. The other witnesses have gone into way more detail about this than I will. But essentially, one of the quicker or more obvious solutions to me is to, split the build between 2 yards. And there are there are drawbacks and benefits to this. The benefits that you get the ships in water quicker, at least all of them quicker. And then the cost incurred from inflation due to the quicker build will be reduced. The downside is that you're repeating the learning curves across 2 shipyards. So each shipyard ends up actually charging more per ship on average. And this may or may not cancel the benefits of reduced inflation costs. So that's, yeah.
Thank you. I turn to Admiral Norman, and thank you for being here. And I know you weren't making any opening comments. And want to particularly thank you for all the work you've done on advancing Canada's shipbuilding strategy and making sure that we're getting ships ordered. Can you talk a little bit about the asterisks and how we need to have more AOR capabilities in the ocean, and how that serves to extend our reach as the Royal Canadian Navy?
Well, thank you for the question. I won't speak to asterisks specifically, but I will more broadly address the issue of resupply and how important it is for a Navy with any aspiration for going beyond your own coastline. So in the simplest terms possible, the joint support ships, which are under construction in Vancouver at the moment, are a variation of what is called generically underway replenishment capability. In essence, it allows a group of ships to operate farther afield because it carries with it in that group its own logistics support. So that includes fuel, ammunition, potentially food, and other supplies. As it relates to the numbers and how significant this is, in essence, it's a force multiplier. If you have a group of ships of whatever size, 2, 3, 4, and you can keep them at sea longer, or you can extend their reach in terms of being able to go farther afield, that's where this joint support ship capability comes into play.
So Admiral Norman, if we have 2 joint supply ships that will sometime get delivered in the near future, and the asterisks, does that provide us with enough capabilities to support the fleet that we're going to have in the future, or do we actually need one more on top of that?
Well, back to Mr. Choi's earlier comment about the rule of 3, which isn't so much a rule as it is a practice and a guideline for developing force structure. The minimum you need to have one of anything available to you permanently is 3. And so with 2 plus 1, you're at the bare minimum. And if you want any more flexibility over the long term to accommodate things such as maintenance or any unplanned problems you might have with a ship, then any greater number than 3 gives you the flexibility of having at least 2 available to you on a nearly permanent basis.
Thank you, Admiral Norman. Thank you very much. We now go to Mrs. Thompson for 6 minutes.
Mr. Chair, and thank you to both witnesses for coming today. Mr. Choi, I'd like to just zero in on a couple of your comments in your opening statement, and certainly one is the complexities of the challenges around the national shipbuilding strategy, and to that, the very real need to support Canadian shipbuilding and to move beyond, just this fall and this season of procurement. So with that in mind, in March of 2022, you presented a paper that highlighted the drawbacks of off-the-shelf procurement, where pre-designed equipment is purchased from existing suppliers. So if you wouldn't mind explaining what are some of the costs associated with adapting defense systems purchased from other countries for use in Canada, and is buying more defense systems off the shelf a viable option for Canadian Armed Forces, and also considering that Coast Guard has a role here as well, because we're obviously replacing the Louis Saint Laurent, which is critical in terms of Arctic travel and research and just support for the capacity to move within very heavy ice conditions. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Thompson. Great question. So off the shelf, it gets thrown around a lot as a general solution to all of Canada's procurement woes. But in reality, it covers up a lot of minute details that really, dictates the timetable and timeframes and cost of buying, quote unquote, off the shelf. Essentially, when you're saying buying off the shelf, you can either mean literally a ship that's already in service or just about to enter service and just sitting there. That's something that the Egyptians do very well. And so they end up with a fleet of, very different classes of ships. And so they can't really train or maintain them really well. But in most cases, off the shelf means you're buying a design that's already in existence. Now, it seems simple enough on its own, but, even for a ship, there are multiple design stages. So which stage of that design are we talking about when you're saying off the shelf? Is it the very beginning where you say, okay, this is what it looks like, this is what it can do? Or is it the second stage where, okay, you know what it's supposed to look like, you know what it's supposed to do, but how are you actually going to get there? What are the literal nuts and bolts and the steel plates and the equipment and the pumps that are actually going to make that drawing, that that concept into a real actual vessel? And then finally, you have to give the shipyard the instructions to actually put it all together. And so when you say off the shelf, which stage of those three are you really looking at? And the further back you go, the longer it's going to take and the more it's going to cost. And so even for a ship, like the JSS, the Joint Support Ship that's being built in Vancouver, that was technically an off-the-shelf solution. It was based off of a ship that the Germans had already built and already had in service. And you think, oh, well, that's super easy and, it should be, super basic to just convert it into something that we can build here. Well, in actuality, it's because, there are all sorts of design considerations when you're building in a different country versus your own that is incorporated into the design itself, and that you have to then go back and readapt into our own industries and our own capabilities. That's one thing. Second thing is, of course, the time period. It's been roughly 15, 20 years since that original design was created. A lot of things have changed in terms of regulations and proper survivability and habitability requirements for our Navy. And so all these things have to work back into that original design. And I would argue that in some cases, working from a clean sheet design is easier than modifying an existing one, just because you have much more room to say right from the outset where you want things to be and how it should be. Thank you.
Thank you. Back to another article that you released recently. So in 2022, in the Arctic Yearbook article, you argue that the Arctic population in Canada is dependent on military and civil naval activity in that region. How does civil and military vessels, or how do they these vessels sustain civilian populations in Canada's Arctic?
So this is most easily visible in the Coast Guard, right? So for now, the Canadian Coast Guard is a dominant federal maritime presence in the Arctic. And what they do is, of course, provide vital icebreaking services to ensure that, northern resupply vessels, commercial shipping, can actually get to those northern communities and supply them with the necessary food, fuel, material that's required to sustain them for the rest of the year before the next summer shipping season. So that's the first and most commonly appreciated role of the Coast Guard icebreakers. Secondly, this is one that doesn't happen too often anymore, but sometimes the Coast Guard themselves carry supplies on their own ships, and they deliver these supplies to certain communities like the Eureka Science and Weather Station, where the sea ice is too heavy for commercial shipping. And so they take that stuff right along to the shore and gets them, ensure these communities get those very vital supplies. So those are two major things. And then, of course, they serve fundamental basic services that you expect to see in Southern Canada. So like, search and rescue services, navigational aids to navigation, maintenance of those things. So, mariners can use the water safely around them. And of course, in the coming years, as more and more of the Navy's Arctic and offshore patrol ships come online, there's going to be a much greater naval militarized presence up in the north. And in some cases, there isn't, as far as I know, a really solidified plan for how we plan on using them. But I imagine there'll be some way to make use of these Navy vessels to help out the Coast Guard with some of the missions that they have up there that is not, pure icebreaking. So there will be a gradual, I think, convergence of the two, both the the civilian missions that the Coast Guard carries out and the general naval sovereignty presence that is up there, and the two will combine together very well. And of course, it's something we see over in Greenland. The Danes, they don't have a Coast Guard, they have a Navy, and they use their patrol ships that are some smaller, a little bit less capable than ours, for a lot of the same mission to support and enable civilian uses of the seas. So this includes, breaking open ports, so allow fishermen to go out into the ocean, go out and sea, and access the resources there.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Choi. We'll now go to Mrs. Vignola for 6 minutes.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Mr. Norman, thank you for being here. The fact that you accepted to show up before this committee today simply adds to your noble spirit, which I want to recognize. You were dragged in the mud, whereas you dedicated your life not only to defend this country, but also when you were on mission to find a type of ship for this country that was needed, while making sure that the project was a success, even though defense procurement is a real problem. The fact that you're here to enable this committee to better understand defense procurement clearly shows that you are a man who is fundamentally upright and faithful to your very strong convictions. Thank you for accepting to answer our questions. Vice Admiral, I read a lot about the saga surrounding the Asterix and the horrible moments that our country experienced. Something caught my attention, whereas you were under fire for going ahead with the Asterix agreement. The newly elected government had received a letter from a shipyard. It was possible that a second supply ship, the Obelix, be constructed by the Asterix construction, the Davy, whereas sailors love Asterix, whereas the Asterix was built on time and respecting the budget. Why has the Obelix never been built, whereas we need at least 3 of such?
Admiral, you're still on mute. There we go.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Merci, Madame, pour votre question.
Thank you, Madam, for your question and your comments. Unfortunately, I cannot make any comments related to the Asterix, nor related to the possibility of second vessel. All I can say is simply repeat what I told Mr. Bazan earlier, that there's a demand for more than one ship, and it's not up to me to determine the best way of delivering them. Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Norman. We shall change direction. On what basis should defense procurement, on what should it rely to avoid any interference from people who don't have any knowledge of defense and construction issues when it comes to large vessels, and to ensure that the taxpayers' money doesn't end up in the wrong hands?
Je vais répondre en anglais.
I will respond in English.
Fundamental issues associated with procurement. And it's not just a problem in Canada, it's a problem amongst all of our allies, which is how we separate the political processes associated with the expenditure of large amounts of taxpayers' money from the more mechanical aspects of determining the legitimate requirements for military capability and the ultimate delivery of those requirements in whatever form they take. Canada is not any better or any worse, in my opinion, in this regard. We have our own issues, and they are fundamentally Canadian. I think your committee and others who are discussing these issues need to look at where political intervention is legitimate and where it is not. My sense is, observing over the past few years, that we're starting to see a separation in terms of the actual mechanics of the procurement process itself once the key decisions are made, and they're left to officials to manage. The bigger issues related to whether a procurement program is in the national interest, what the strategic considerations may be, what type of capability Canada should or shouldn't have, and what sort of rough budget. Those are legitimate government decisions at the political and cabinet level. So I think the long answer to your question, if I may, is that finding that balance is really important. And I think it's one of the key areas that we need to continue to work on in order to ensure that the women and men of the armed forces are getting the equipment that they need, and ultimately the taxpayers of Canada have confidence in the system that's delivering those capabilities. Merci.
Ms. You have 5 seconds.
Merci.
Thank you very much, Mr. Norman.
Thank you. We will now go to Mr. Johns for 6 minutes.
Well, thank you both for being here, and thank you, Vice Admiral Norman, for your service as well. And I did want to ask about procurement. I guess it's following the thread of Ms. Vignola about how to do things better. Right now, we've got 4 ministers responsible for procurement, and it's hard to pinpoint, I guess, who's responsible when chips are late, for example, in terms of accountability and efficiency. We can look to Britain and Australia, where they've got a single defense procurement minister. Maybe, Vice Admiral Norman, just given your experience, would you be able to comment on that? Provide your thoughts?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Johns. I think this is one of the key areas where there are some best practices amongst our allies and our friends, which we could learn from. Your question goes right to the heart of the distribution, and ultimately, I would suggest the dilution of authority and accountability as it relates to procurement in general, and especially when we're talking about these larger, complex programs. In my experience, and certainly my observation since I retired, despite the statements and attempts to tighten things up, at the end of the day, the results are not necessarily any better, despite the rhetoric. And I think that this is an area where Canada could learn. I think there is real opportunity for a more unified and simplified approach to procurement. And I think that ultimately, if we did it right, if we really put our minds to it, we could make a big difference. And as I said earlier, that would help both the end users get the equipment they need quickly, and also it would ultimately address the issue of accountability to the taxpayer.
Can you expand on, you talked about our allies in other countries, like I know Australia and Britain have done that, that single defense procurement minister, and we're really grateful you're here, because I think the committee really needs to hear from you about better best practices and what we need to do in terms of, fixing some of the way we're doing business right now when it comes to procurement.
Yeah, well, those are 2 really good examples. Another could be the French. The French have a slightly different model. Their defense industry is completely integrated into their economic strategy, and so they consider defense spending as an element of economic and industrial development, so that they also have a very integrated relationship and a single point of accountability as it relates to procurement. And I think that that's really a direction we need to move. I don't know exactly how it should be set up. I'm not going to offer a silver bullet because I don't think there is one. But I do believe we need to move away from this highly distributed approach where nobody really ultimately is accountable. They're accountable for certain aspects of it, but where they intersect and overlap is actually where we're putting rubber on the road, so to speak.
And you touched on the political involvement. Can you just provide some thoughts on how we can improve the transparency and the oversight, and also ensuring that we're fulfilling our roles in the political lens and versus the government officials lens?
Yeah, so the government officials, I believe, should be there to manage the machinery of the process. And I believe that notwithstanding a lot of challenges, which is a whole other discussion, they're doing the best they can in the circumstances. Where we start to see the interface with the political and where it is unhelpful is when it starts to affect ultimately some of the larger decisions that then affect both the timeliness, potentially the budget, or potentially the broad capabilities that go into these major programs. And when the political processes delay decision making, that costs taxpayers money. Even just for inflationary reasons, they cost money, but there's a number of other drivers that result in the fact that these programs, the later they are, the more they cost ultimately. And even if it wasn't just about cost, it's the capability that's supposed to be delivered in a timely fashion, which is not getting to the women and men that need it.
Is there really good examples from our allies where they've got an efficient system in terms of understanding roles and responsibilities, and they've had strong transparency and accountability and timely decision making?
Yeah, so there is no perfect system. And every one of those allies, if you were to ask them, they would offer you lessons learned from their own experiences. But I think the two examples you provided in your opening question are very good places to start. And I believe as we look at Australia specifically, this is a country that has fundamentally revolutionized the way they do business over the last 20 years or so. They still have major challenges, and they would be the first to admit it. And not every one of their programs is perfect, but I think that is a really good place to look for some best practices.
Super. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Thank you, Admiral Norman. We will now go to Mr. McCauley for 5 minutes.
Great. Thanks, Mr. Chair. Admiral Norman, it's great to see you. And I just want to start by thanking you for your many decades of service to our country. I just want to touch on quickly, the government, we've all been talking about the need for new submarines. How would you see that kind of roll out for Canada? It's obvious we cannot make them here. Hopefully we're not going to get in a process of delaying for decades while we're trying to figure out how to make them here. Should we go to, which country should we be looking at? Japan, France?
Okay, well, let me respond initially by challenging somewhat the premise of your question. We could build them here. I am not advocating that we should, however. I think this goes back to...
Sorry, how could we build, and I'm not doubting, I want to learn, like, everything I've heard is we do not have the capacity to build them here.
Well, so we would need to dedicate the capacity, and we would need to develop some very specific skills associated with the manufacture of the pressure hulls. But there are similar technologies used in the offshore oil industry and elsewhere that could be migrated to that. What I'm trying to say is that it's not a categoric statement that we could or could not do it. We could do it if we chose to do it. The question really is does it make sense for us to do it? And that's where I believe the answer is probably no, just because of the level of effort required to develop those capabilities for what would be a relatively small production run of submarines. So with that said, now we get into the conversation about what are the potential options. The good news is that there are a variety of viable options out there that could potentially address Canada's requirements, which are still evolving. So it'll be important to know exactly what type of capability we're looking for, but fundamentally, a number of our allies are capable of delivering these capabilities. The French, the Germans, the Japanese, who have not yet exported a submarine, but are starting to show interest in the possibility of doing so, and the Swedes, among others. But those, to me, would be the key players in that discussion.
Great, thank you. The T-26, the combat, the surface combatants, how do you see that playing out? Obviously, it's been delayed. Do you think we should continue with the program as it is proceeding right now, which is, we all know, massively over budget, massively delayed? Do we just see it till its end? Do you think we should perhaps stop at 3 and reevaluate? What are your thoughts on that, please?
So,
and I don't want to paint you into a corner, but I just look for general thoughts based on your experience.
No, I appreciate the question, and I think it's legitimate in the context of your work as a committee and where we find ourselves. So the Global Combat Ship, as it's generically referred to, was intended to be exactly that. It was intended to be a ship which could be modified for multiple users, and those users would benefit from the advantages of a common design, global supply chain, et cetera, et cetera. In theory, that was the idea. What we now have are 3 customers, of which Canada is potentially going to be the bulk of the combined fleet user. And most of the capabilities are now separating in terms of individual users' requirements. So those advantages are not necessarily playing out the way they had been initially imagined. As it relates to the program and whether it should or shouldn't proceed, here's the problem. The first of the Halifax-class frigates was commissioned in 1992. I was a member of the crew. According to the Ontario vehicle registration requirements, a vehicle of 30 years or older is eligible for historic or vintage plates. That makes Halifax 30 years old this year, and with a projected life of another 10 years or so until we have these ships up and running. I would say that it would only make sense to change plans if you could actually deliver a similar capability in less time. We find ourselves now in a place where, despite a lot of noise and a lot of rhetoric, the most viable path to the future is the path we're currently on. And that presents a number of challenges, which are well documented and openly discussed. But I think throwing the baby out with the bathwater, so to speak, at this stage would be a mistake.
Thank
you, Admiral. We'll now go to Mr. Johari for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I'll be spending my time with MP Baines. Mr. Chair, if you can flag in 2.5 minutes, then we could switch. Thank you to both witnesses for joining us today. We appreciate your testimony. I'm going to start with Mr. Choi. A quick clarification. In your opening remarks, you talked about that the cost of the CSC program should be included in our defense spending. Can I get a quick clarification for you? Don't you consider that already part of the defense spending?
I'm not sure which part you meant in my opening remarks about that. I think it was more about different ways of calculating the cost of these ships. Of course, it's already calculated in the defense spending over time, right? It's included in Strong Security Engaged, the budget plan for the next 20 years. Okay. So it's all in there. So I think there must be.
Okay, thank you. No worries. It could be me. In one of your previous articles, you had made a statement that the competition between the liberal and authoritarian world order is taking place in the oceans, and you mentioned that Canada needs to prepare for that world. That preparation in your point of view.
Sorry, you lagged out there for a moment. Can you repeat?
So how is our national shipbuilding strategy facilitating the preparation for what you suggest that we should be prepared for the world, that the next world is fought on the oceans?
Yeah, that's right. So as I mentioned, the Western shipbuilding capacity is fairly limited. The Americans, the biggest one of them all, are already stretched at their limits, both in terms of shipbuilding and their maintenance capacity. And so literally anything that any one of us can do to help contribute and add to those numbers is absolutely vital to ensure that, China's massive, shipbuilding rate is actually kept in some degree of a parity to our collective coalition and allied partners, whether that's in Europe, whether that's in East Asia, Australia and the rest. So, when I say that we need to do our part in contributing to the liberal world orders, naval capacity, it's not about us doing it on our own, but in conjunction with everyone else with whom we have, very strong foreign policy interests and ties. And so everything that we do here with naval shipbuilding, it has a diplomatic component, it has a foreign policy component, and it's something that we should leverage and we should point out more in our diplomatic discussions with our allies. And this goes back to the question of, can we build these ships faster without risking boom and bust? One of the reasons we're taking so long to build these ships and why they cost so much is because we want to prevent the shipyards from going bankrupt at the end. And one way to solve that is to build more ships of different kinds, not necessarily CSCs, of course, but there are many other types of vessels that, the Western powers can use. And, whether they're even just cargo ships, for example, to help carry troops back and forth, to help carry supplies, more replenishment ships, more supply vessels, repair vessels. No one says that NSS has to begin and end with the ships that were begun back in 2010. You can expand the order, much as Eleanor Snow noted in the last committee, with the Brits, they have a new shipbuilding strategy, which takes a more comprehensive nationwide look at what is needed across all sectors, from the federal level, provincial, municipal, private, commercial. So, yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Johari, you have a minute and a half left.
I yield that time to MP Baines.
Thank you, MP Johari, and thank you to the chair and our witnesses that are joining us today. My question is coming from Richmond, British Columbia, and the shipbuilding, strategy is extremely important to our marine sector here on the West Coast. My question is to Mr. Choi. Between 2012 and 2021, we heard from the PSPC that the national shipbuilding strategies contributed an estimated $21.2 billion to Canada's gross domestic product, and it's created and maintained over 18,000 jobs a year. So what has been the national shipbuilding strategy's contribution to the Canadian economy in the recent years, in your opinion?
It's, to be honest, it's not something I have a very good answer for you for. I look at it more in terms of building a capacity and capability in this country to do, to provide this, very important strategic capability for this country and for our allies, to be honest, in terms of us doing our part. And in terms of this contribution to our economy, every single dollar spent in Canada to pay for these shipbuilders goes back to Canadian workers. And, so it comes back to the question of, if we bought, ships from abroad, obviously they have a 100% ITB obligation, but that's not going to go to the same places that we would if we build ships here. Because when we build ships here within our own countries, then it's our entire supply chain within this country that benefits. So, that ranges from, the most on the ground, most blue collar workers up to, the engineers sitting in front of the computers. Everybody, along the supply chain gets some part of that shipbuilding money. Whereas, if you're just building these abroad, they have no obligation to fulfill their ITB requirements in anywhere near as, fair or equitable across all of society.
Thank you, Professor Choi. And if, Professor Choi, if you have anything further you'd like to add to that, if you want to put that in writing and submit that to the clerk, we will distribute that to the members. Thank you very much. We'll now go to Mrs. Vignola for 2.5 minutes.
Déjà à moi? Parfait.
Me already? Perfect. Mr. Choi, a while ago, you talked about the Arctic. I think it's obvious that it is necessary to work with the Arctic and the vessels for that region. That being said, the ARPs that will be built will not be able to navigate in the southern Arctic from September to April because ice is very thick, too thick for their capacity. But we have only 2 polar icebreakers that would eventually be constructed. My first question, 2 polar icebreakers, will that be enough to meet the needs, the material needs of the communities in the far north, And if their service breaks, in your opinion, what will be the impact on their safety or security? The impact on their economy? And third question, for 2 years now, we have been waiting for a third shipyard to be qualified officially to be part of the strategy. These delays in the decision making, is it going to result in higher cost for all Canadians? Thank you.
Thank you, Madame. Great questions. Are 2 polar icebreakers enough for our capacity to north? Well, it would be a very straightforward replacement of our current capacity. It wouldn't be a real expansion of the capacity because right now we have 2 heavy icebreakers. At least that's what the Coast Guard rates them. One of them, the St. Laurent, is more powerful than the other, but they're both rated as heavy icebreakers. So right now, to the extent that our Coast Guard is able to meet the requirements of the North, then replacing them 1 for 1, would suggest that that's also enough. But of course, we'll have increased traffic in the north, increased need to have more capacity. And so, if I had it my way, definitely, 3 icebreakers, 3 heavy polar icebreakers would at least be a good start for that. But it's also worth noting that a lot of this depends on the quality of the medium icebreakers that are also going to be built. Will they have an increased icebreaking capability compared to the current medium icebreakers? And more importantly, will they be more available because they'll be newer? And that, in essence, will provide that greater capacity to carry out important operations up in the north.
Excuse me, I apologize for interrupting you, Professor Choi, but unfortunately, time commitments, and so if you could provide a written answer to the other questions, should you feel, and provide that to the clerk, it would be appreciated. We will distribute it at that point in time. Now we'll go to Mr. Johns for 2.5 minutes.
Yeah, Professor Choi, I'm going to go right back to you about the Arctic, actually. And you spoke earlier, a couple of questions that you've had around ensuring that the military and civilian vessels help support the Inuit and the communities in the north. Can you speak about the importance of consulting the Arctic communities on ship procurement? And if so, what considerations you think should be raised?
So one of the most straightforward aspects is, well, should they break the ice at all? Because of course, a lot of the Inuits use, ice over waters as their transportation routes as they get from point A to point B. And of course, that also, feeds into how they hunt and how they gather, local resources as well. So, consulting them in terms of how we use these icebreakers is absolutely vitally important. But in terms of, consulting them on how exactly the ships will be built or the particular characteristics, I'm not so certain of that myself, unfortunately. So that's about all I can tell you.
Do you feel Canada's doing a good job at consulting them?
I don't think they felt that it's a need, but I think that it's something that they should, absolutely go and consider, just to see maybe if they have some additional insights or opinions on, what they think how the icebreakers should, be operated and which particular technical aspects may be helpful or not helpful in their own livelihoods.
Vice Admiral Norman, just a quick question. You've seen how, you probably heard me speaking a lot about pushing for more shipbuilding capacity given dry dock space in the Premium of it and demand on the West Coast. Do you feel that there's a disconnect between Transport Canada and investments from Canada to create more capacity to take on projects and be able to deliver? I mean, you had great comments around the subs, but do you think that there's opportunities for Canada to do more?
Well, I can't speak to what's going on inside Transport Canada, but I can speak at a general level that I do believe we have both an opportunity and a responsibility to both build and leverage the capacity. And Mr. Choi's made a couple of good comments with respect to broader capacity amongst the allies and how it's shrinking. And so it is in the national interest. I think we need to take a broader look at what we can use the shipyards for. And a number of fleets are managed provincially, for example, and most of them are built offshore. And they're built offshore because of cost. And so there's real opportunity to potentially incentivize a Build in Canada strategy, which in and of itself will help build and sustain capacity over the long term.
Thank you, Admiral.
So
thank you, Mr. Johns. We will now go to Mr. Bazan for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Admiral Norman, I want to just drill down a little bit more on the whole issue of submarines and with your experience as Commander of the Navy. Biggest proliferation of weapon systems in this world, of course, is missiles, and second largest proliferation of weapon systems is submarines. What's the best way to fight submarines?
With the submarine. Yeah,
so with the challenges that we're now looking at in the Arctic, especially with Russia, and of course bigger interest by the People's Liberation Army Navy of China, like they are definitely transiting through the Arctic more and more. What do we need to defend our Arctic territory from a submarine standpoint?
Well, the first thing we need is a far more robust underwater surveillance capability than we currently have. And that'll give us a better sense of what's going on, who's where, and therefore what reactions we may or may not need to take. And then we need to increase the ability to respond and to be present. That means more submarines, and it means more submarines which are capable of operating in or certainly on the edge of the ice. And that will drive us into a debate as to how much under ice capability we may actually need for a next generation of submarine.
In your opinion, how many submarines do we need to defend all three coasts?
Well, I'm on the record in a publication a couple of months ago as saying that when you do the math and going back to the rule of 3 or 4, I believe we need at least 3 submarines available to us at any point in time. And that could be geographically logical, one on each coast. And in order to maintain that, we're going to need roughly 3 times that number. So we're looking at 9, which probably means we're looking at, I would suggest 10 is probably not a bad number, but that is an unsophisticated, rough calculation. But I look forward to hearing what the Navy thinks.
During your time as Vice Chief of Defense Staff, you got to see defense procurement up close. You saw the good, the bad, and the ugly. So how do we streamline this? Because as you already said, the longer it takes, time is money, inflationary impacts, and longer our mariners, our Navy officers, our soldiers, our air crews, the longer they go without new kit, the more dangerous it gets for them. So how do we speed things up? Where's the low-hanging fruit that we can actually go out after and get stuff done?
Well, there are several problems intersecting simultaneously. There's a significant lack of capacity to actually move program, which is getting worse. There is a problem related to the sheer weight of process. So when you combine those two, obviously that's a bad outcome. And there's also a problem as it relates to the actual decision making, typically at the front end, in order to get these things moving, so to speak. There are other problems as well, but I think before we start throwing solutions around, we need to figure out which problem in what order we want to tackle, and recognizing that the impact in one area could adversely affect another. But those to me are the three key areas: capacity, process, and decision making. There are others, but those are the big ones that are hampering their ability to move forward.
So one of the things that sometimes gets complaints on is that with a lot of our big procurement that we do, often there's, instead of just buying off the shelf, as we always talk, we're going to, even if we're going to build in Canada, we then Canadianize it. Is that a necessary part of the process and the Canadianization, especially of surface combatants, as a case in point, which is a different ship than what the U.S. is building, which is a different ship than what the Brits are building, which is a different ship that the Aussies were going to build, all of them, of course, being Type 26. So, is it necessary? Is there the cost-benefit ratio significant enough to make us a better Navy?
Unfortunately, the answer is it depends. There's no one size fits all answer to that question. I think there are legitimately areas where rapid procurement, off the shelf, they're commercialized or readily available technologies at a faster rate of production actually makes perfect sense. And there are other areas where, given the significance of the asset, the period over which it's going to be owned and operated, and the degree of flexibility that we're trying to put into single platform, which other navies, for example, have multiple platforms to do the same job. Canadianization is a necessary evil. Doesn't mean it's bad. I really think it comes down to how we do it. And I think there are ways that we can be much smarter and much more agile in that approach.
Thank you, Mr. Bazan. And we'll now go to our final questions from Mr. Baines. 5 minutes.
Maybe Mr. Kuzmir check with him.
Sorry.
Change the order.
Is it Mr. Baines or is it Mr. Kazmierczak?
I believe it's Mr. Kuzmierczak.
Okay, Mr. Kazmierczak, 5 minutes.
Okay, great. Thank you so much, Mr. Chair. Mr. Choi, in your excellent submission to this committee, you had mentioned one of the statements you made is that warships should serve as a tool of Canadian foreign policy. And you talked about the fact that the Halifax shipyard could produce 25% of combatant capacity for North America. So you sort of looked at it as in broader geostrategic considerations. Can you weigh in on that or explain that in terms of what you meant by that?
Sure. So within North America, obviously the two main countries with a large ocean-going navy are the United States and Canada. And the U.S. over the last couple of decades, due in part to their wars in Afghanistan and Iraq, have really let their navy sort of become sort of the redheaded stepchild, and really not giving it the attention that a country that depends, upon a free flow of global trade that you would expect from it. And part of this means that their defense industrial base has been really challenged, especially the naval shipbuilding side, where they technically could build more ships than they currently can, but they haven't been able to do so, which leads to layoffs and lack of efficiency and higher costs on their end. And right now they've been, basically they're at a point where they're really stretched out in terms of shipbuilding capacity. So they got two shipyards right now. They're actually in service building their heavy destroyers. And then they've got one that built the much maligned littoral combat ship that's being converted to building their new frigates. And, they tried to add a fourth yard this year, but that got canceled, was not approved. And so by, 2025, they're only gonna have 3 shipyards building surface combatants. At roughly 1 ship per year at each yard, maybe if they're lucky, depending on how the budget goes, maybe 2 at the 2 of those shipyards. So, in certain situations, we might end up being, in Halifax shipyards, being one of the 4 shipyards in North America that actually produces high-end surface combatants. And of course, if you follow one of my policy proposals and you split the CSC builds across 2 shipyards, then Canada ends up having 2 out of 5 North American shipyards that can build these heavy surface combatants. And that's a major capacity for North America and for our allies as well, if they decide to take us up on that excess capacity that will build up.
And you mentioned that in your submission that this can be leveraged in discussions with Americans when the topic concerns Canada's willingness and ability to pull our weight in NATO. Can you unpackage that for us a little bit, how this strengthens Canada's position? This capacity strengthens our geostrategic sort of positioning vis-a-vis other partners, because I thought that was something that was interesting, and it's something that hasn't really been discussed in the testimony at this committee thus far.
Yes,
it strengthens our hand.
Absolutely. I think it does. And it comes down to the whole question of, is the 2% GDP metric a good one for measuring a country's contribution to the alliance security protocols? And, if we include the ability to actually build massive, high-end warships, that is a major consideration that you wouldn't include as part of your 2% GDP that NATO considers, because it's a shipbuilding, it's an industrial capacity rather than technically military spending. And so it's about that manufacturing base that is not included, but which you could bring up in negotiations. And we know the Americans have, demonstrated over, the previous administration, a certain willingness to highlight a lack of contributions by other members. And so by highlighting these lesser known, lesser highlighted elements of how Canada actually contributes to the overall defense of the alliance, I think that's a very solid chip card in our deck. And of course, we have to also remember that within the general context, Canada is in a geographic situation very similar to the United States, but we operate with 1/10 of the population and 1/15 of the GDP. And so, all of our security concerns are predominantly on the other sides of 2 giant moats. They're the 2 oceans. And so we need to be constantly abroad and present, much like the United States does, but we have much fewer resources to do it. And so our ability to nevertheless make use of what we have and be constantly present abroad makes us actually a very unusual country. That makes it very hard for us to compare with other countries that are otherwise similar in size and GDP.
Thank you, Mr. Kazmierczuk. And with that, we've come to the end of our questions. And so I would like to thank the witnesses for your appearance and your testimony today. Professor Choi, thank you for your insight and greatly appreciate it. Admiral Norman, I would like to publicly thank you for your service to this country and thank you for being with us today. And on a personal note, Admiral, I would ask you if you wouldn't mind passing on my best wishes and hellos to your father, General Norman, and your mother, and thank you as well. And thank them for their service to this country. And with that, the public portion of our meeting is now complete, and we will now proceed to the in-camera portion of the meeting. So I'm about to suspend the meeting. As members of the committee know, we'll have to go off if you're on Zoom and then come back on using the logo and identifications that were in the form that was sent to you. So with that said, I will suspend the meeting temporarily.
Thank you.